One of the big storylines to follow this season has been the Ontario Hockey League being open about how they are wanting to be aggressive in expansion. And I've done a few videos just updating as we go along this ride. It all started really back in August. I did a video looking at expansion or relocation candidates. And since then, we've been getting tidbits of information throughout. All starts, of course, with the USHL having two teams that have expressed interest in joining the Ontario Hockey League. We know those teams are the Youngstown Phantoms and the Muskegon Lumberjacks. And after the NCAA voted in favor of allowing CHL players to join their ranks, that's really stepped up the rhetoric from the two hockey teams to the point that the OHL conducted a vote and said they're willing to accept the two teams, although that was blocked by USA Hockey, saying that they're not in favor of those two teams leaving the USHL to play for the Ontario Hockey League. And of course, that last update came in the month of December from Elliot Friedman. He made that report on Hockey Night in Canada. And since then, things have gone quiet, which is kind of to be expected with negotiations going on behind the scenes. But we do have an update. Sportico was the first one to report on this yesterday that Jeffrey Kessler, he is an antitrust lawyer. Well, he's representing the Youngstown Phantoms and another USHL hockey club as they want to leave the USHL to play in the Ontario Hockey League. So this is the first step of news that we're hearing that's challenging the vote of USA Hockey. And for Kessler, he's recognized quite a few organizations throughout his time. So he's got quite the resume as an antitrust lawyer. He's represented the NFL Players Association, including Tom Brady. He's also had some legal challenges with the NCAA and most recently with NASCAR. So it's bringing in this antitrust lawyer is a big step from the Youngstown Phantoms, who mean business, that they do want to leave the USHL to join the Ontario Hockey League. Of course, the Phantoms are a team that plays in Ohio, so this would be the first team to join the OHL from that state, which would then give playing rights to those players to enter the OHL draft. So that's a whole other layer of discussions. And then we don't even know how the whole expansion would work. Would that roster then move over to the OHL, or would there be an expansion draft? So there's still a lot of question marks. But the first hurdle right now is to address these legal options. As right now, the Phantoms, they've already told the USHL that they intend to leave at the end of this season. They want to join the Canadian Hockey League as early as next year. But the big argument is just the way things have been handled with USHL, because over the years, this has been a stepping stone for players who want to go to the NCAA route. And before that vote, players that were considered professional athletes, they received payment for their services, they would lose their NCAA eligibility. So the plan was that these players would play in the USHL, so then they're not being paid. So that's where the antitrust will come in and challenge the setup that they have right now with the USHL. So we'll have to wait and see where it goes from here, because basically the Phantoms are saying it's been a mini NCAA is what they're calling the USHL. But it did get a little more interesting as Rick Westhead from TSN, he confirmed earlier today that it's not just the Phantoms. The Muskegon Lumberjacks have also retained the services of Jeffrey Kessler. So it's now becoming a little more clear as to the steps that are taking place with these two USHL hockey clubs. And Westhead even went on to say that, for USA Hockey, they've been actually in a battle too where the USHL clubs are wanting a transfer fee of $50,000. That's according to Westhead, for players to leave the USHL to go to the Canadian Hockey League. So I know there's been a lot of Kitchener Ranger fans wondering, does Adam Valentini end up coming to the OHL? Well, if there's a $50,000 transfer fee, that may have been preventing him from joining the Kitchener Rangers. But also to note, the USHL wanting to protect the U.S. National Development Program, as they have a team right now in Plymouth. They play at the former home of the Plymouth Whalers. And if you remove Muskegon and Youngstown, their nearest team in the league they play would be the Chicago Steel, which is quite the commute. Obviously, they're used to it. If you look at the map of the USHL teams, a lot of them are from Lake Michigan and west. The only teams east of Lake Michigan would be Muskegon, Youngstown, and the U.S. National Development Program. So a lot of interesting parts in play right now. Now that there's now a lawyer being brought in, an antitrust lawyer, it's going to be interesting to see how USA Hockey addresses the situation. The OHL, they're being quiet on this, which is very understandable. But well, who knows? At this point, we could be looking at these two teams joining as early as next season, and I would expect that this would have to be resolved in the next couple of months, because right now is the time that they usually put together the schedule for the following year to figure out dates and travel times and whatnot. And you also have to address the fact that if these are expansion teams, how do these rosters look? So the sooner they can get this done, then the better from the OHL's perspective. But it does seem as though these two teams could be heading to the OHL sooner rather than later. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But I just wanted to provide that update talking about Youngstown and Muskegon. Now, yesterday I did a video looking at the race in the East Division, as it's like right now a three-team race, it seems, to take that top spot. And today I wanted to focus a little bit on the Central Division, because there's four teams that I think have a solid chance of taking top spot in the Central. Right now, the Niagara Ice Dogs, they have the first spot. And right now they have a record of 26-14-2-1, 55 points. And for the Ice Dogs, they're a young team and ahead of schedule. They've surprised many throughout the regular season. Some are still surprised that Niagara is sitting first in the Central. This just goes to show how solid of a core that this Ice Dogs team has. And look out for next year. This team could really send a statement. Of course, they didn't make any moves at the OHL trade deadline, which I think is the best for this team. Let this team gel. Plus, you're getting amazing goaltending from Owen Flores, the overage netminder, as he's wanting to end his junior hockey career on a high note, and he's been doing just that. And after the Niagara Ice Dogs, you have the Barrie Colts. They're 1 point back, a record of 26-14, 1-1. The Colts, of course, snapped a 5-game losing streak over the weekend with back-to-back wins over Windsor and Niagara, and that was a big win in St. Catharines. The Colts got within 1 point, a top spot in the Central. And then after that, you can't count out the Sudbury Wolves. They're a team I feel like was overlooked for most of the regular season. They have a record of 22-15-5, 49 points. So they're just 6 points out of first place right now in the Central Division, although they're on a 3-game losing streak. That road trip through the West Division was not kind for the Sudbury Wolves. Plus, we need to find out what's going on with Nate Krawchuk and his health after being injured in the game against Sarnia. And the Brampton Steelheads, they were the favorite coming into this season to potentially win the Eastern Conference. They picked up Carson Rykoff from the Kitchener Rangers. They brought in Sova, and it seemed like this leadership was there, and we would expect that they would make additions throughout the regular season, which they did at the deadline. Really liking the pickups of Ulrichsen and Connor Smith from the Owen Sound Attack. Then you got Braden Gillespie now as the backup goaltender. And this team, health, that has been the problem. Right now they have a record of 19-15-7, good for 45 points. So they're 10 points back of Niagara, and typically you'd see a team 10 points back and think, okay, they probably don't have a shot of winning the division. But this Steelheads team, they're now riding a 6-game point streak. They've won both of their games this year against the Kitchener Rangers. This team, once they're healthy and they got a full group, they can be lethal. And we've also noticed that they've kind of broken up the line of Angus McDonnell, Porter Martone, and Carson Rykoff. So now you're getting those additional lines that can be lethal. So I would not count out the Brampton Steelheads up to this point. And then looking at the past 10 games really says a lot too, as all four of them are playing some pretty even hockey right now. Niagara, over their last 10, they're 4-5-1. Barrie and Sudbury are both 5-5 over their last 10, while Brampton 5-2-3. So points in 7 of their last 10 games. And that's why they're making ground. And I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the regular season, the Brampton Steelheads are knocking on the door, challenging for that top seed. The only question mark I have for Brampton would be their specialty teams. 19.1% is their power play. That's the lowest out of these four teams. And their penalty kill, 69.8%, which again, the lowest out of the four teams. Obviously, this team, I think, is going to improve their specialty teams. But right now, at this point in time, at the time of recording, that's probably the weak spot right now when it comes to this Brampton Steelheads team. Now, looking at the schedule ahead, these four teams, they have been picking up points and having a busy schedule, but it doesn't get any easier for them. Starting off the Niagara Ice Dogs, to wrap up the month of January, they're going to be on the road. They're going to be in Brantford and Erie this weekend before hosting the Erie Otters on Sunday. But then they have a key matchup February 1st against the Barrie Colts. That one is at the Saddle Arena. And they're also going to play against the Sudbury Wolves at home on Friday, February 7th. So mark those on your calendar if you're a Niagara fan, because those are key matchups when it comes to the Central Division standings. As for the Barrie Colts, tonight they are in Owen Sound, but then after that, they play home to the Brampton Steelheads tomorrow. So that's a key matchup in the division, followed by the Brantford Bulldogs on Saturday. That's again at home. And then they wrap up the January schedule with a home date against the Ottawa 67s. But like I said, they have a game against Niagara coming up on February 1st, plus a game in Oshawa on January 31st. So the Barrie Colts schedule, it's busy. And so they've got some key games here coming up. And that's where it's going to be fascinating. Who can you gain ground on or make up ground on through these games? So the head-to-head contests are going to be vital for these teams going down the final stretch. As for the Sudbury Wolves, they have a big game Friday night. They're going to be home to the London Knights. Of course, they lost 8-1 to London back on Sunday. So how do they respond to that? And then they're in North Bay on Sunday, and they wrap up the January schedule at home against the North Bay Battalion on the 31st. And then they open February with a home-and-home against the Brantford Bulldogs. So their next divisional opponent with them in the Niagara Ice Dogs on February 7th. But they also have a home game against the Brampton Steelheads on February 14th. And Brampton's actually a team that the Sudbury Wolves are going to see quite a bit of. They've got, I believe, 4 meetings left to go with the Brampton Steelheads, which is the most for a divisional opponent. And that could be key for both of those teams. If you could sweep those 4 games, if you're the Sudbury Wolves, then you can hold off the Steelheads in the Central Division. But if you're the Steelheads, you sweep those games, well, there's one opponent you're going to be able to pass. Now you just need to worry about the Barrie Colts and the Niagara Ice Dogs ahead of you. And speaking of Brampton, looking at the rest of their January schedule, they're in Barrie tomorrow night, so that's a key matchup. Then they're on the road in Flint and Windsor, and Windsor's not going to be an easy place to play, the WFCU Center. And then they're in Peterborough to wrap up the month, and then they host Peterborough on January 31st. So for the Steelheads, they've got some opponents who are below the playoff line coming up, back-to-back the Petes, and then the Owen Sound Attack. But like I said, those games against Sudbury are going to be key for this Brampton Steelheads team if they're going to make up ground. Because 10 points, that's quite the distance, as we're almost 3/4 of the way through the 2024-25 OHL regular season. But you cannot take the Steelheads team lightly. This is a team right now primed and ready for a deep playoff run now that they're healthy. And if they can stay healthy, of course, they're going to be a threat. And of course, with Jack Ivankovic in net, you can't go wrong with that situation either. So right now, it's hard to say who's going to take top spot. I would almost give the inside track to the Barrie Colts in the way they've been playing. Obviously, they just came over a 5-game losing streak, but I do like the chances for the Barrie Colts to win the Central Division. But if it's Niagara or Brampton winning the division, or even the Sudbury Wolves, I really wouldn't be that surprised. I'd be impressed, though, if Brampton can overcome this 10-point deficit, but I also wouldn't be surprised if they overcame the 10 points. So that's how I see it from the booth. Let me know in the comments section down below your thoughts on the Central Division and how things are playing out, and or your thoughts on the possibility of adding Youngstown and Muskegon. Obviously, it's a slow process. We're getting details every now and then in regards to this, and right now we're getting an antitrust lawyer now involved with the whole process of those 2 teams leaving the USHL. So love the interaction. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you again soon.